Nobody saw this coming, not even the people who have been watching her closest. Because when a 21-year-old tennis player from the Philippines showed up on a list of New York Fashion Week's top 5 standout names, the entire industry stopped scrolling for a second and did a double take. And if you think that sounds like an exaggeration, wait until you hear what happened next. Because this is the story of how Alex Eala went from a promising young athlete chasing rankings on hard courts to a name that fashion editors are now typing into their headlines. And it did not happen by accident. It happened one sold-out shirt, one designer bag, one perfectly timed appearance at a time. So let's start from the beginning, because that's where this whole thing gets interesting. Picture this. It's a normal week in the tennis calendar. Players are packing bags, flying between cities, doing the usual grind of practice courts and press conferences. And somewhere in the middle of that chaos, a young Filipino player lands in New York ahead of the US Open, expecting the usual routine of qualifying rounds and media obligations. Except this time, something different is waiting for her. Within days of touching down, her name appears on a list most professional athletes never even get considered for, a ranking of the standout figures from New York Fashion Week. She's sitting right there among designers, models, and celebrities who have spent entire careers building their place in that world. The tennis crowd, the ones who follow rankings and match stats, are stunned because this is not supposed to happen to someone who is still climbing the tour. This is the kind of recognition reserved for people who have spent years cultivating a fashion identity, not someone whose day job involves chasing down forehands. But here she is anyway, proof that her influence has quietly spread far past the baseline. And here's the thing, this moment did not come out of nowhere. It was building for months, piece by piece, outfit by outfit, until it reached a tipping point that even the skeptics could not ignore anymore. So let's rewind a little, because to understand how she got here, you have to look at what happened with her merchandise first. A little while before all this Fashion Week buzz, Nike quietly dropped a signature shirt with her name on it, black, oversized, with a delicate floral design stitched across the front and her name scripted across the back. Priced at just over $40, nothing flashy on paper, nothing that screamed luxury or exclusivity. And yet within hours of going live on Nike's website, it was completely gone, sold out, not a single size left in any listing. Normally, that alone would be a nice little story, a rising athlete having a good merchandise moment. Except the context is what turned this into something people could not stop talking about, because sitting right alongside her shirt on that same online store were pieces from some of the biggest names in the entire sport, players with Grand Slam titles, players who have spent years at the very top of the rankings, and their merchandise was still sitting there untouched, available in every size, while hers had vanished within minutes. When a fashion writer covering the release pointed that exact contrast out publicly, it lit a spark that spread across social media almost instantly, because suddenly this wasn't just a tennis story anymore. It was a cultural moment. People were asking how a player outside the very top of the rankings had managed to outsell athletes who were household names in the sport, and nobody had a clean answer. They just had the numbers, and the numbers were impossible to argue with. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, because the shirt itself was not without its critics. Plenty of fans online were vocal about the design. Some called it plain. Some said the dark fabric made the artwork nearly impossible to see. One comment that circulated widely basically begged for a lighter color scheme just so people could actually make out what was printed on it. Normally, that kind of criticism kills momentum for a product. But not this time, because even with all that pushback, even with people publicly complaining about the design choices, the demand did not slow down. If anything, it created this strange, almost magnetic pull where people wanted it more because everyone was talking about it. Complaints and sellouts happening in the very same breath. That kind of reaction, love it or critique it, but still needing to own it, is usually reserved for icons, not up-and-coming athletes. And that tells you something about where her career was heading. But the shirt was really just the opening chapter, because a few days later Nike unveiled something bigger, a royal blue dress design specifically for her US Open run, priced around $140. This piece was different, not a simple crew neck with a name on the back, but a full basketball-inspired design, with mesh panels cut into the sides and back like the netting you'd see on a hoop, a racerback silhouette built to sit smoothly over a sports bra. Made from recycled performance fabric with all the moisture-wicking technology you'd expect from a top athletic brand. And the color, that specific shade of old royal blue, fans immediately connected it to the deep blue found on the Philippine flag. Whether that was an intentional nod from the design team or a happy coincidence, the internet ran with it instantly, turning a simple color choice into a symbol of national pride. That connection mattered because it tapped into something deeper than fashion. It tapped into identity. And that's really the thread that runs through everything she's worn this season, because if you look closely at her kits, you'll notice they're not just performance wear, they're storytelling. Small phrases in Filipino stitched into the fabric, phrases that carry real weight. One translates to something like, "What you plant is what you will eventually harvest," a quiet reminder about patience and effort paying off over time. Another translates to something like, "Once something starts growing, there's no stopping it." And these aren't throwaway design choices, they've shown up before. On the visor she wore during her Wimbledon debut, and on an earlier shirt created in collaboration with a Filipino artist that incorporated the national flower into the print. When she spoke about wearing these details during her run at Wimbledon, she didn't downplay how much it meant to her. She talked about how sentimental it felt to carry pieces of her culture with her onto some of the biggest stages in the sport, how it was partly a tribute to where she came from, and partly just because she genuinely found the designs beautiful. That honesty, that willingness to explain the meaning behind what she wears instead of treating it as just another marketing angle, is a big part of why people have connected with her so strongly, because it doesn't feel manufactured. It feels personal. Now let's talk about the moment that really got people paying attention outside tennis circles entirely. Because before any of the Nike news broke, before New York Fashion Week ever entered the conversation, there was a much quieter moment that fashion-obsessed fans caught almost by accident. She posted a simple outfit check on her Instagram story, nothing dramatic, just a travel look before a flight from the US to Canada. A plain white tee, relaxed purple pants, comfortable loafers, the kind of low-key airport outfit anyone might throw together. Except slung over her shoulder was a bag that immediately caught the eye of anyone who knows their luxury fashion, a tote with unmistakable quilted detailing in a rich plum tone, purple and white tweed woven into that signature diamond pattern. It did not take long for eagle-eyed fans to identify it as a piece from a French luxury house, believed to be from a fall collection dating back over a decade, the kind of bag that isn't just expensive because of the brand name stamped on it, but because it's genuinely hard to find, sitting in that sweet spot where age and rarity push resale prices up rather than down. Estimates for what a bag like that could fetch on the resale market land somewhere around $25,000. Inside that tote, based on what fans could see in the photo, there was more than enough room for her oversized headphones, the same ones she's often spotted wearing as she walks onto the court before a match. A small detail that somehow made the whole moment feel even more real, less like a staged fashion statement and more like an actual glimpse into her everyday life. When asked about her taste for designer accessories before, she's been open about it, admitting flat out that she has a weakness for a good bag and, honestly, given everything else she's been photographed carrying since that admission, it checks out completely. But it's not just designer luxury pieces that make up her style story, because she's also leaned into her heritage in ways that go far beyond a Nike collaboration. She's worn modern interpretations of traditional Filipino formal wear, designed by a family member, a renowned designer, featuring sculptural sleeve work, soft flowing draping, and clean, elegant lines that manage to blend generations of craftsmanship with a distinctly modern silhouette. When she wore that ivory ensemble publicly, it wasn't just a fashion moment, it was a quiet celebration of where she comes from, worn with the kind of confidence that made it clear this wasn't costume. This was identity. On the opposite end of the spectrum, she's also shown up in playful, breezy vacation looks, patterned slip dresses, mixing florals with animal print for casual celebrations, proving that her style range isn't locked into one lane. She can do polished and elevated just as easily as she can do relaxed and fun. That versatility is exactly what makes her interesting to follow, because you genuinely don't know what she's going to show up in next. And that unpredictability, paired with the fact that everything she wears seems to carry some kind of meaning, whether cultural or personal, is a huge part of why her fashion presence has grown the way it has. So by the time the New York Fashion Week recognition rolled around, landing her among the top 5 standout figures of the entire event, it didn't feel random anymore. It felt like the natural conclusion of everything that had been building quietly for months. The sold-out shirt that embarrassed bigger names in the sport. The flag-colored dress that turned heads before she'd even played a match. The designer bag that fans spotted in a casual travel photo. The traditional Filipino formal wear that celebrated her roots. All of it stacking on top of each other until the fashion world simply could not ignore her anymore. And that recognition mattered because it wasn't self-proclaimed. It wasn't a brand deal dressed up as an achievement. It was external validation from an industry that has zero obligation to care about a tennis player's off-court style. And yet there she was anyway, sitting among names that have spent entire careers chasing that exact kind of recognition. And look, this is the part where a lot of athletes would probably struggle, because when your off-court presence starts generating this much attention, there's always a risk that it distracts from the actual sport. That people start caring more about what you're wearing than how you're playing. But that's not really what's happening here. If anything, her on-court story is what makes the fashion story even more compelling. This is someone who won a junior Grand Slam title at Flushing Meadows at just 17 years old, who recorded her first main draw Grand Slam win on that exact same court, a place that has already given her some of the most defining moments of her career. Now she's walking back into that stadium not just as a competitor with something to prove on the scoreboard, but as someone whose merchandise outsells former world number ones, whose outfit choices get dissected by fashion writers the same way her match strategy gets dissected by tennis analysts. That dual identity, athlete and style icon existing at the same time without one canceling out the other, is genuinely rare, and it's part of why people are so invested in watching what happens next. Because here's the bigger picture question that this whole story keeps circling back to: what does it actually mean when an athlete builds this kind of crossover appeal? The answer is bigger than just selling shirts or getting invited to fashion events. It's about building a brand that exists independently of results on a given day. Tennis, like any individual sport, is brutal in its unpredictability. You can play the match of your life and still lose. You can have a bad week and drop in the rankings. But a genuine connection with fans, the kind built through cultural representation, authentic style choices, and a personality that feels real instead of manufactured, that's the kind of thing that survives a bad tournament. That's the kind of thing that keeps people invested even during a slump. And that's exactly what's being built here in real time. The tournament crowds already reflected it. Reports throughout the summer described her practice sessions drawing crowds far bigger than you'd expect for a player at her current ranking, turning what should have been quiet, low-key training sessions into genuine events packed with fans who just wanted to watch her hit balls on a practice court. That kind of demand doesn't happen for just anybody. Tournament organizers have reportedly had to adjust court assignments because of it, giving her more prominent courts, even over players ranked higher than her, because the crowd draw simply justified it. And when you combine that level of grassroots fan energy with a sold-out merchandise line and a New York Fashion Week nod, you start to understand why people are using the word icon instead of just athlete. There's something worth sitting with here too, because none of this seems to be happening at the expense of her cultural identity. If anything, the fashion attention has amplified it. Every major brand collaboration she's been part of has found a way to weave in something distinctly Filipino, whether that's the national flower stitched into a print, phrases in Tagalog embroidered into performance wear, or a color palette that echoes the national flag. She's talked openly about how much that representation means to her, describing it as sentimental, as a way to pay tribute to where she comes from while competing on stages that most people from her home country never get to see up close. That combination, global visibility paired with unmistakable cultural pride, is part of what makes her story resonate so widely, because it's not just about looking good in expensive clothes. It's about a young woman using every platform available to her, from a tennis court to a runway list to a simple Instagram story, to represent something bigger than herself. So as the US Open approaches and she prepares to step back onto the same court where her career truly began all those years ago, the question everyone seems to be asking is simple: can she keep doing both? Can she keep climbing the rankings on the court while her influence off the court continues to grow at this pace? Honestly, based on everything that's happened over the past few months, betting against her at this point feels like a mistake. Because every time people have counted her out, whether it's questioning why organizers gave her a bigger court or criticizing a shirt design while simultaneously buying it out completely, she's answered with results, with sellouts, with recognition from people who have zero reason to hype her up unless she's actually earned it. That pattern, quiet doubt followed by loud validation, seems to be exactly how her story keeps writing itself, chapter after chapter. If this Fashion Week moment is any indication, this is really just getting started. Because a 21-year-old who can sell out merchandise faster than former Grand Slam champions, who can turn a simple travel outfit into a viral fashion moment, and who can walk into one of the most competitive events in the fashion calendar and land among the top 5 standout names, that's not a fluke. That's a trajectory. And trajectories like that tend to keep climbing. So whatever happens on the court at this year's US Open, one thing already feels certain: the world outside of tennis is paying very close attention now, and it doesn't look like that attention is going anywhere anytime soon.